Okay, everyone, welcome to Locus Podcast. This is class number 3 in the Maamor Vayichan Shom Yisroel. This is the third discourse in the great book, the great Hemshech, and the great continuation of discourses, 5672. And we are holding in the middle of chapter 9. Again, this is class number 3 in this group. I think that makes us now, this is the 49th class, okay, in the entire series. So in the last class, we were just getting into this idea, how the influence of the connection between the oiros, the lights, and its source in the infinity is an open, revealed connection. The manner in which it evolves is through expression and revelation. Versus Kalim, the vessels, the way it comes forth from the general, from Hashem, from the Ein Sof, is in a manner of concealment, blockage, disconnect. This is all to explain why the Kalim are going to be in a state of limitation, which means not expressing infinity and boundlessness of Hashem, of the infinite source. And as we learned in the class, he's now explaining the relationship of the vessels to the Ein Sof. Of course, it's the way it emerges is through an interruption of the tzimtzum. And as we discussed in the earlier classes, a complete tzimtzum, a complete blockage of the light. Now he's discussing the relationship of the kalim, of the vessels of Atzilus with the Rishimu. The Rishimu was not affected by the tzimtzum. The Rishimu was what's revealed through the tzimtzum, and the Rishimu is a trace of Ein Sof. And since the Kalim come from the Rishimu, this would seem to connect the vessels with some aspect of the Ein Sof, of the Infinite One. That's why he is explaining that since the Rishimu, this is the point we were learning last, since the Rishimu is a koyach ne'elam, it's not a power of expression, revelation, unlike Kav, which is all about to reveal, to express. But Rishimu is a koyach ne'elam, which means a power of concealment. It's a concealed power, and it's hidden in its essential. It's from its very get-go, from its very in God himself. It's the concealed element of Hashem. It's about concealment, and it is concealed in the infinite. And that's why whatever it produces is in a manner of concealment, where it conceals itself from whatever it's producing. And in that sense, it's not expressing itself in it. And therefore, we have an element of disconnect as well when the Kalim originate and come from the Rishim. Now, in order to explain this better, he's going to give an explanation over here, which I'm really excited to give over, in which he's going to bring forth this idea. And what he's really doing is like this. He's saying, let's take a look in the Kalim, in the vessels, and find inside of them of the Rishimu. Since the Kalim come from the Rishimu, let's try to find the DNA of the Rishimu in the Kalim, in the vessels. And once we will discover where that DNA is, and then we'll find out, and then we'll see how the way it's present over there is not in a way of connection, but in a way of kind of distance and disassociation from its source. So he says, Ve'inyanhu, and the idea is as follows. In a Yadua, it is known. Let's begin the exploration. This is the second paragraph in chapter 9. At least in the Sefer I'm using now. I'm using different books, so I'm not sure it is in the other one. Let's see in the other one if it's the second paragraph or it's in the middle of a paragraph. Very possible that it's in the middle of a paragraph. Yes, it's in the print before this last print. It's the same paragraph. Here we are. Just a couple of lines into chapter 9. And the idea is, then Yadua is known. The Zayin Shemoy She'enem Mchakim and Be'eses Firis. The 7 names of Hashem that are not erasable. Which means that God is has Hashem's name. You're not allowed to erase. You're not allowed to erase God's name. But it doesn't pertain to every reference that we reference God. For example, one of the ways in which a lot of times we reference Hashem is the word Rachum, the compassionate one. And in Aramaic, you say Rachamana. The sages uses many times the word Rachamana. Rachamana means the compassionate one. Or that's because that's in Aramaic. In regular, it would be Rachum. Or let's take the word Avinu Malkeinu. Who's our father, our king? That's God. But you're allowed to erase the word Avinu Malkeinu because it's not a name of Hashem. And when you say Rachum or Rachamana, it references God, but it's not considered a name of Hashem. There are 7 names that are explicit names of God. And that's why halachically you're not allowed to erase their names, these words. If you wrote them, you're not allowed, it's forbidden to erase it. For example, the name Elokim, the name Kale, the name Shindalad Yod Shakai, right? Tzvakos, and so on and so forth. These are all names of Hashem, which you're not allowed to erase. Now, these names, why does Hashem have so many names? Why can't they just have one name? It's because every name expresses another aspect, another angle, so to speak, of God. When God is behaving in a certain way, we refer to him with a certain name. When Hashem is showing another aspect of his nature, so to speak, then he's called by another name. So the name of God, when God is being a compassionate father, is very different than when he's being a stern judge, when he's exhibiting those characteristics. So Kabbalistically, the various different names are explained that they are in the Sfirot. So the name Kel is referring to Hashem's light coming forth through the attribute of kindness. The name Elokim is Hashem's light coming through the attribute of judgment, as he's going to explain now. However, when we say that, we need to recognize that, do we mean the sphera? Now, in a sphera, because we've been learning earlier, the spheros, the attributes are made up of lights and vessels. Are we referring to the light or are we referring to the vessels? The problem with saying that we are referring to the vessels, as we're going to see in a moment, is the vessels are not really God himself. Because the vessels, as we're learning over here, were produced almost something from nothing. They have they have what we call limitation. They have specification. And therefore, to a certain degree, to a great degree, the vessels are already not God. Okay? So therefore, we would be far more comfortable saying that when we refer to names of God, and each name is referring to an attribute, probably would make sense to refer to the lights, the Or. The light, we said, is still infinite, the light that shines in Chesed. The Or, the flow, the soul of the attribute of Chesed, the soul of the attribute of Gevurah. And so that's when we say God, it means God vesting himself, the infinite light vesting itself in these vessels. Problem with that is that the light doesn't exhibit much of the characteristics of kindness. If it doesn't exhibit much of the flavor, the taste, the characteristics of kindness, and the light is just simple light, because for that reason, it's still a reflection of the Ein Sof, because it doesn't have definition. So why would you differentiate? Then all the lights are the same. Why would you call one light Kale and the other light Elokim? You see, these names, the name contains within it the meaning of kindness, as he's going to show in a minute. That Kale is a word that represents the power of kindness. And the name Elokim is a word that contains within it the flavor of judgment and sternness and might. If we're referring to the lights don't exhibit these. There's not much taste of kindness in the light of kindness, and there's not much taste of Gevurah in the light of Gevurah. The lights are all kind of pretty much the same light. So then it's hard to say that the names are applying to the light. So he's going to have to throw it back to the Kalim. But if he's going to throw it back to the Kalim, you're going to have a problem. The Kalim are almost like creations. They're not totally creations. But if you're going to put it back on the Kalim, so how can you, when we're praying, we're using these names. You're only allowed to pray to God. You can't pray to entities. You can't pray to angels who are intermediators who carry God's light. The Sphirot are also carrying God's light, especially the Kalim. So how do we resolve this? Let's be patient. We'll see in a moment. But let's first see how he begins this exploration. The Yeni Yeduot is known design Shem B'Sheinim Chacham, the 7 names that are not erasable. Haim, they are, in general, they are the Esa Spheres and the 10 spheres. Now hold it, there's 10 Sphirot, and yet we're saying there are 7 names. So shouldn't it be 10 names? Because primarily he's referring to not all 10 spheres, but the last 7, which are the attributes that conduct the world. The emotions are much more interactive with the world than the intelligence, which is above and above. I think we learned about that in one of the classes earlier. So it's the emotional attributes which are more engaged in the creation. So, and the Esa spheres, they are in the 10 spheres, but again, primarily the lower 7. Shem Kael, now he explains. The name of Kael is B'Chesed. So whenever we are saying in davening, Kael Elyon, for instance, in Shmona Esrei, we're calling Kaeli Ata, you are my God. Or whenever we're mentioning another verse is Kael, we are speaking to and via the emotion, the attribute of God's kindness. There's a verse, actually. Chesed Kael Kol Hayom. Okay? The kindness of God all day. So you see the word Chesed together with the word Kael. Shem Elokim, the name of Elokim, B'Gevura, is in Gevura, is in judgment, to the degree that the sages say, there's a verse that says, Elohim lo sekalel, a judge do not curse. And it doesn't, according to the simple interpretation, it's not referring to God. It's referring to a judge. That means even judges are called with the name Elokim, because Elokim means judgment. All right? So therefore he's saying, when we use the word Elokim referring to God, then it's referring to God's attribute of judgment. So he right away explains that when we have an option to say that the names are attributed to the Kalim, to the lights, or they are attributed to the Kalim, the vessels, or to the Oros, to the lights of the Spheroids, which one are we referring to? So he concludes, he right away gives you he resolves it. It's referring to the vessels of the 10 spheres. Although it's problematic, we're going to see in a moment, but still we have to say it's referring to the vessels and not to the lights. Why? And he explain in a minute. Shem Kael, the name Kael, B'Kli HaChesed, is in the vessel of the attribute of kindness. Why? Because he says the name implies the characteristic. And if you're going to be referring to the light doesn't have much of that character. The Kael, Ulashin Gedula, the word Kael means greatness. And the attribute of kindness is expansion and revelation. So God's enormity, his greatness is through his kindness, his greatness is revealed. And that's what the word Kael means, an expansive revelation of greatness. A great person, a person with a lot of power and might and great, is called Kael, as we're going to see soon. Elei ha'aretz, the mighty ones of the land. Okay, the famous ones. The Kael, Lashon Gedula, Kael is the word of greatness. V'gam Lashon Toikif, and also strength. Strong and great. But we're not talking about a strength of withholding. We're talking about strength, because there's a different type of strength. It's a strength of withholding. That's the strength of Gvura. But this is the might of revelation. V'hainu Toikif Ashba. This is the powerful force of being mashpia, of giving. The giving with strength. It's giving strongly. As it says in the book of Pardes, which is a great Kabbalistic book by the Ramak, Ramosha Cordova. And therefore, he says, since the word kale means strong, a big, strong one, so that's, you can't speak of the lights, because the lights of chesed the lights of chesed are not defined by any definitions. It might be soft and timid, not strong and powerful, because it doesn't have any characteristics, neither of strength and greatness, or it might be the or could be humble, meaning it's neither, it's nothing. This characteristic of greatness, mighty greatness, this is applicable to the vessels of kindness. Because over there is chesed, there is notes, not just notes, there is the experience of kindness. The Shom Shayach, and only in the vessels it is appropriate inyan hagdula to speak about greatness, the toikev hashpa, and a mighty influence, a force that's influencing in a powerful way. And the same will be with the name of Elokim. And for that matter, all the 7 names, like Adon, the other name is Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, Ado, whatever, we don't say it, is the name of God's kingship. And it implies that Adon means master. So king is the master. So that that is applicable only in the vessel of the attribute of kingship, because that's where it has the characteristics of being a master, being a king, being a ruler. The light that flows in Malchus is almost the same light that flows in kindness. And the reason I'm saying almost is because we're going to learn later that there is already very, 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 very light notes of differentiation in the lights themselves. We can't say, I mentioned this a long time ago in one of the classes, we can't say that the lights don't have even the trace of anything. In a very benign way, there is already a leaning, as we're going to see later, but we're going to get to that. I don't want to go there right now. But for all practical purposes, or based on what we've discussed earlier, the lights are still a reflection of the Or Ein Sof that does not have any character and definition, and the vessels are the ones that are characterized and defined. And therefore, the names which imply these features must be referring to the vessels. And also the name of Elokim, which is the character which emphasizes judgment. This is only possible in the vessels of Gevura. So we have to say then that it must be referring to the vessels, not to the lights. Here you have a problem. The other problem, as if you're going to apply these names to the vessels, the problem we're going to have is Achmash Hashem Oisem Ba'akelim. But when the names of God are in the vessels, here's the issue. You can't say it's the vessels themselves, because the vessels are yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. And if the vessels are something from nothing, how can that be referring to, if the names of God are referring to God? Ein zeh b'hakelim atzmam. It can't be the vessels themselves. Shaharei Hashem Oisem lahaboyrei yizbarach. Because the name is to the Creator, the God Himself. We only have one God that we're praying to. Elo hakavana. But the intention is Elo or, the light, the achayus, and the energy shel hakeli, of the vessel. Ooh, what does that mean? This means that we're going to introduce now a third element. That's what's going to happen. The more we're going to learn, the more layered and nuanced and complex everything is going to get, and it's going to be so rich. So here we introduce a third idea. We spoke that there are lights, oiros lights, and then there are vessels. There's lights are like energy, and then there's vessels. The vessels are the characteristics, the definitions, and the light is the pure force, the energy. Right, reflection of God. However, here we introduce something new, that the vessels themselves have, in addition to them being vessels that contain light, but the vessels themselves have their own intrinsic chayos, energy, life force that's embedded in the vessels, that enliven the vessels, which would mean like this. What would happen if the lights, if the oiros, the lights of Atzilus, the powerful lights that flow into these vessels, into these containers, would retract, God forbid, and the lights would not flow into the vessels. God would shut, God, chas v'shalom, God would shut the faucet, and his energy flow would not flow into the vessels. So one argument would be then everything would disappear, because the whole force is the force of the divine that has to be in it. But in Zohar it says, Kant'ad, I'm quoting a piece of Zohar from a passage. It's called Pasach Eliyahu. He mentioned it earlier. We referenced this earlier. It's a passage attributed to Elijah the prophet, in which it says, Kad antistalik minayu, when you depart from them, ishta'ara kuli, which means if the lights of Hashem would depart from the sphirot, this is the way it's explained, ishta'ara kuli, they all remain kegufa beloy nishmasa, like a body without a soul. That means that the lights are the soul of the sphirot. And if, God forbid, the soul departs, they would all remain like dead bodies. Now, dead bodies imply that it still exists. Let's use the human experience. We all know that our lives are attributed to our soul. Our soul is very much the whole power of our human experience. Our living beingness is attributed to our soul. Yet, when a person, God forbid, passes away, and we know that's a disconnect from the soul, from the body. The soul retracts or removes itself from the body. So the body remains soulless and therefore lifeless. But the body is still around. You have this dead body, the corpse, and we have we have to deal with it. We bury it, so on and so forth. The body is still very much in existence. Hold it. If the soul is its life, how does the body live? How does the body have energy and existence? And the answer is it doesn't. It's dead. Yeah, but it's still in existence. How are the neutrons and electrons that are making up in the cells? They're still operating, because if the cells would cease to, if all the internal mechanisms that make up the billions of cells that make up the bones, flesh, and whatever of the body, then if that would stop its energy, if it stopped then it would disappear, right? Everything is made up of these, so of the atoms, the tiny atoms and cells and so forth. And there's life there, as we know, that matter, we found out scientifically too, that matter is energy as well. So there is life. So what does that tell you? The body has two types of life. There is life that is the substance of matter itself. And that does not come from the soul. The soul is not producing the body. Once there is a body and the body has its own life in it, then the soul comes and enlivens that body. Right? So we have two types of energy. We have a soul, which is purely spiritual. When it goes into our bodies are visibly alive. And then we have another type of life, which is the life of the body itself, which generally, when a soul is not there, eventually it decays and gets less until it decomposes. But it doesn't decompose immediately. That's because the body itself, just the physical matter itself, has life onto its own. So just like it is with our physical bodies and our spirit and body down here, the same implies, let's take the same idea, obviously in a gazillion unfathomable way higher. But yet, if we say, the Zohar says, that when the soul of God, which means the lights that flow in the spheros, if they would exit, if they would depart, if they would go back above the vessels into their source, be reabsorbed in their source, the vessels would remain like bodies without a soul. The very fact that it doesn't say they would disappear, it says they would remain with bodies without a soul, means that the kalim themselves have an energy. Who is this energy? The energy is divine. What's that energy? The divine energy that's in the vessels. It's that energy that's making the vessels be. It's producing the vessels. That's that energy. That's that energy, that divine energy That's not the vessel. It's creating the vessel. That divine energy, there are 7 different types of energy, each one producing a different vessel. Those are the names of God. When we refer to God as Kel, and when we refer to Hashem as Elohim, and the various different names, we're referring to the divinity, the divine energy, the life force of the vessels themselves. Again, we cannot be referring to the light, the soul that goes through, because the soul doesn't have any of the characteristics. So why would you call it Elokim, Elokel, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, Shin, Dalet, Yud, Shakai? Why would you give any of these names? It must be referring to the vessels. But it can't be the vessels in a case like the body, because the vessels are not divine. They are something. And Hashem is Hashem. So it's the divine input. It's the godliness of the vessels themselves. It's the godliness creating the vessels. These, and they're 7. That's why I produce 7 different types. What's this godliness? Where is it coming from? This godly energy that's in the vessels, which each one is a different name, that's the Rishimu. That's coming from the traces of Or Ein Sof that were left over, that the Kav kind of delivers that down, reveals it. When the Kav comes down, it picks up these letters, it picks up these hidden powers of the Rishimu. And these energies that now go, we're going to see later, get picked up by the Kav, but it's these powers, these definitions, these defining, it's powers of the Or Ein Sof. It's still, it's so to speak of the, it's not so to speak, it is of the Or Ein Sof. It is of the infinite one. And when these are now come down and embedded, so to speak, into the Kalim, they are the life force of the body of the Kalim themselves. And that is, on that we can refer to as God. Because the Rishimu, what's the Rishimu? Traces of Or Ein Sof, which is traces of Hashem himself. So it would not be considered like idolatry, God forbid, that we're calling something else in the name of God. It's these elements of the Rishimu that are really of the Or Ein Sof. And that's isn't that amazing that we find out? And that's what we mean if we break it down. What is the 7 names of Hashem that are not erasable? So perfect, so precise. However, the question over here is, once we find out that there is chayos, there is life, and they are the life, the essential DNA of the Rishim. That's what I said earlier. The DNA of the Rishimu that's in the Kalim are the chayos of the Kali, the life of the Kali itself. Yet, although there is pieces of Or Ein Sof, so to speak, there is elements of the Or Ein Sof, which are these names, which we're comfortable calling this energy God, because we're talking to God with these names, and yet we're saying that the Kalim are dead, even though it possesses this energy. The answer is that yes, this chayos, this life force that comes from the Rishimu, and the Rishimu is Or Ein Sof, but because it's a power of concealment, you don't see that these crumbs of chayos, of life, are a continuation of the Or Ein Sof, and therefore the spheros are called dead unless they have oiros going into them. It would be like our bodies, perfect. Although our body has life, that life that's in our body is not visible. What's the proof? The proof is that when God forbid a person dies and the life, their soul goes away, we all say they're dead. And then we can start philosophizing, but really it's not, you can't think there's no life there, because if there wouldn't be any life there wouldn't be an energy, there wouldn't be a body. Okay, so that's mathematics already. That's not visible. That you have to be a scientist already and understand that matter is energy. And then you can deduce from there that there must be life there. And then you find out that in the body itself, there is its own life. So even though the body is a living entity, it's still dead. What's alive? The soul is alive. So the soul is openly alive. And when the soul is in the body, there's no question that the person is alive. The person is visibly alive. The body itself is visibly dead. In essence, deep inside, in a hidden way, there is energy that's life. So the life is hidden. So now let's apply the same thing to the spheros. The spheros are like gigantic bodies, cosmic bodies, the kalim, the vessels. Without the oir, the energy that's in them is dead. Although there is energy over there. So much so that this energy is energy of it's chayos from the Rishimu, which were, as we said earlier, the Rishimu, and therefore this energy, we can call it by God's name, but yet it's not exhibiting life. Why? Because the only one who's really alive is God. God is alive. Hashem is life. In order to be alive, there needs to be a connection to God. The Oyer Ein Sof is also alive. There has life. Oyer Ein Sof, because Oyer Ein Sof is a revelation of the Ein Sof, is a revelation of God. God is revealing himself. Now, the Oyer Ein Sof, the life of the Oyer Ein Sof is infinite, endless life. That has to be mitigated because we couldn't handle that. So the light of the Kav, which the Kav is again a continuation and an uninterrupted continuation of the Oyer Ein Sof. So the Kav, where Kav flows, there is life. What does Kav produce? The Kav produces the Oiros of Atzilus. They're alive. So when they go into the spheros are kicking. They're alive. But when you shut down, let's imagine, God forbid, you switch the Kav down, shut the thing, and there's no life flowing. That's what it means, kan antistolic. No life flowing from the Kav, from the urn. And you're left only with Kalim. There is life there, but not alive. Why? Because the link between the pieces of everything is disconnected. Although, and remember we said I gave in the last class, I mentioned that the way the Rishimu influences, it's like a spark. It's a disconnected spark. It's a spark. It's of the fire, but it left the fire. That's the influence of the Rishimu. I didn't realize I had my eyes closed that we went over the time. I'm going to go with another. I just want to read this inside. The intention is to the light and the life force of the vessel. This is the chayas of the keli itself. Levada oira malubish ba, not the light that's enclosed in it. In the other Maamor, and the chayas of the kelim themselves, whom Rishimu come from the Rishimu. And this is the meaning of these names. They are drawing forth. They are a hamshacha, something that is drawn from the Rishimu, lahavos, to bring about, ulahachyois hakelim, and to make the vessels come alive. V'harei hamshachas elum haRishimu, but these hamshacha, these flow from the Rishimu into the kelim, einam b'pchinas gilui or, is not in a state of revealed light. Hainu b'pchinas kiruv, in a way of openness, udvekes b'mekoyram, and attachment in their source. Kiyim b'pchinas helim, but rather in a state of concealment. And that's why the kelim are in a state of concealment, which means lifeless. As it says, kad antistalik, when you leave, when the oiris go away, they remain like a body without a neshama. So we see, even though they have life unrelated to the lights, they have their own life, which are the powers from the Rishimu. They're like dead bodies. There's no life there. Why? Because there's no connection to the Oyer Ein Sof. It's all in a state of concealment of light and revelation. like stated elsewhere, because that which is drawn to them from the Rishimu, it's not in a manner of continuity and connection and attachment in their source. Kiruv, in a manner of closeness, to be in a state of revealed light, only rather in a state of concealment. The Rishimu nelam, because the Rishimu itself is a power, a concealed power. Shom, and all influence that comes from it, hu b'pchinas helem, is in a state of concealment. I had to finish till here because I didn't want to have to climb this again next class. Everyone have a wonderful Shabbos, and please excuse the share being a bit longer than it is usually intended to. Mashiach be here today.